den sidste på scenen inden frokost, og hun er konsulent i psykiatrien, og så er hun også en pioner inden for den internationale brugerbevæglse. Og hun ved om nogen, hvad hun taler om, fordi hun var selv bruger fra hun var 17 til hun var 28, og hun synes, det var ganske forfærdeligt. Og derfor så har hun rigtig mange bud på, hvordan tingene kan gøres anderledes og bedre, så giv hende en rigtig stor hånd. Mary O'Hagan.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to come and talk to you in Copenhagen. My apologies, I do not speak Danish. There are not many Danish lessons available in New Zealand, where I come from. And so I have to speak English, but more than that, I have to speak English in a very strange accent. So my double apologies. Now, today I'm going to talk to... I have my slides here in English because they said they're in Danish and I would not be able to recognise my slides. So, very challenging. So I have them here. Now, I am giving today a talk about peer support, an international overview. I have just dropped into Denmark. I have not even had a conversation about, do you have much peer support here? Is that common in Denmark? Okay. Well, hopefully, after I talk to you today, you will say we need to make it more common in Denmark. Next slide. Now, I'm going to talk to you about lived experience of distress, recovery and services, because it is from this lived experience that peer support comes from. It is a reaction in some ways to the type of treatment that we have had. So we will talk about what is peer support, where does it come from, the current opportunities and threats around the world, and the evidence base for peer support. Next slide. But first of all, I want to tell you something about my own experience. Psychiatry is universal. It is very much the same all over the world. What I experienced in New Zealand is very similar to what people experience in Denmark. I was told at the age of 21 that I have a major mental health problem and that I would not have a career like I thought I would have once, and that I should probably not have children. So I went into a system that took away my status, it took away my credibility, and it took away my dreams. So in doing that, they took away their ability to help me to recover. So I had to ask some serious questions about the way they were treating me and the life they had mapped out for me, the half-life they had mapped out for me. And one of the big questions that I came up with was, well, these services are so ineffective. What is a better way of responding to people in my type of predicament? And one thing I came across very early was a book by Judy Chamberlain. Who here has heard of Judy Chamberlain? A few of you, not many. Judy Chamberlain was a leader in the survivor movement in the USA, a very early leader. And she wrote a book, and a lot of this book was a book that criticised psychiatry from the perspective of lived experience. And in this book, she described peer support services that they had developed in the USA. And this blew my mind. I hope that you understand what I mean. And I thought my mind was blown already, but it blew it more. And I thought, yes, this is one way that we can respond much better to people who have major mental health problems. Okay, so then I went on to develop peer support services in New Zealand after I managed to get out of the mental health system. Now, I want to go through some images of what we were reacting to when we decided in the 1970s and 80s and 90s, when people in the movement said, we need to provide services in our own way for our own people. Now, some of the messages, next slide, some of the messages. One, the first message we got was, you're not welcome here, okay? So, I don't know if you have mental health centres like this in Denmark, where they have glass, and the nurses stay behind the glass, and they never talk to you. See, I told you it's the same in every country. And so when we develop peer support, we say, we're going to make sure everyone is welcome, okay? Because we know what it's like to go into a service where we're not welcome. Oh, another one. I'm not like you. The psychiatrist gives all these messages. He sits across the table. He comes to the centre in his expensive car, and I come on the bus. And he has a big suit on, and all the messages he gives are as, I am superior to you. So in peer support, we value equality. We say, we are together in this, we are like each other. That's a very important message in peer support. Oh, and this one. Well, all over the world, there are men in white coats who say, I know best. And this man is saying, doctor, I want to choose how I'm treated. And the doctor says, oh, you're not just ill, you're deluded. So, in peer support, we react to this type of thing and we say, the person knows best. We the client, we know best, not the doctor or anyone else. So that's very important. Now, when you go, we have some very kind oppressors in the mental health system. And you're my pet. I don't know how that translates into Danish. I won't bother looking. But you're my pet. Oh, you know, you're so cute and nice, and you're nice, obedient and person. And I will keep you in the mental health system and wrap you up so that you can never fly. Okay? So this is, you're my pet. Well, not in peer support. We say, no, we don't have patronising people like that in peer support. Well, another one. Of course, the Trump card, the big thing that they have in the mental health system to make you do what they want is to use force, compulsory drugging and hospitalisation. And of course you have this in Denmark too, don't you? Yes, yes. And we say in peer support, we never use force. We will not cooperate with force because this was done to us. And for many of us, it was a terrible thing to have done to us. And so we will not use it, and we will not cooperate with it. Now, another message we get, many of us in the mental health system, is you will never recover. That's certainly the message that I got. And in peer support, it's very important that we convey a message of hope and recovery. So these are some of the messages that we are reacting to when we created peer support services. Now, I start with a quote. Those who do not have the power over the stories that dominate their lives, power to retell them, rethink them, deconstruct them, joke about them, truly are powerless because they cannot think new thoughts. And this is the terrible situation that people who use mental health services have been in. And when the movement, the survivor movement, came into being, we reclaimed the power to tell our own stories. Now, there are many peer workforce roles, but today I'm going to focus on peer support work. We can have roles, we can be politicians, we can work in policy, we can be managers, we can even be psychiatrists. Well, and we can do anything, but today I'm talking about our role as peer support workers. Now, okay, next slide. Now, what is peer support? It is spontaneous or organised support provided by and for people with similar conditions, problems or experiences, such as mad people and their families. I don't know if you have an equivalent to mad people in Danish, but in English some people say, oh, that's very derogatory. That's not a nice word to use about yourself. Well, we say we have reclaimed the word, and we now talk about mad pride. So, yeah. Next slide. Now, organised peer support. You know, when I talk about spontaneous peer support, that's what happened when we were in the hospital, when we made friends with people, when we helped each other out in the middle of the night because the nurses were too busy knitting in the lounge. Okay, so funded or unfunded, we can have volunteers or paid staff or both. Now, the early peer support was run in independent peer-run organisations, but now more and more mainstream organisations, traditional psychiatry is saying we want to employ peer support workers, so it can be in both. It can include user-run initiatives that have additional goals, say advocacy or small business that can have a very large component of peer support. There are many types of peer support services, and in New Zealand, for instance, we have crisis houses that are run by peer support workers. We have recovery education that is run by peer support workers. We have peer-run advocacy services. And there are examples of all these different types of peer-run services throughout the world. But really, it is not really so much about what we do as peer support workers. It is about the who and the how. See, the what refers to the types of services and supports we may provide to our peers, and we can provide just about anything. But the who must be people with lived experience of madness or mental distress, and the how has to be guided by the values and practices of peer support. And as I will show you soon, the values are very much based on the things we experienced in traditional psychiatry that we did not like. Next slide. Oh, I don't know what that says. I hope it's the right one. Now, the values, they are very, very important to peer support. Many people, many occupations, they go about their work. They don't even ask what their values are. But values are very important. They're more interested in evidence than values. But we are more interested in values. We are interested in evidence as well, but values are very important. Now, the first value in peer support, Self-determination, that is the right to direct our own lives. We talked then about participation and equality, and that is the right to direct our own services. Mutuality or reciprocity is another value, and that's about having equal give and take relationships, because in traditional psychiatry, we were always the ones who did the taking, and we never were seen as being able to give, and that is very bad for human beings. Experiential knowledge, that is the knowledge from my lived experience, not necessarily from a book or a diagnostic manual, but from my own experience. That is respected and valued and shared. And then we believe in recovery and hope that anyone can achieve the life that they want. Okay. And here are some images of, I understand those, they're good. Some images of peer support, and you can see the values, you can see the values lived out in these images. Now, next slide. Some of the practices. In peer support, this is a very new occupational group in mental health around the world. And at the moment, it is a canvas that has just started to be painted. And we need a lot more people to come and help to paint the canvas. Do you understand? But we do have some peer support practices already. One is 12-step programs. They were developed in the 1930s for people with drug and alcohol addictions. Now, they're not for everyone, but some people have benefited from them. RAP, have you heard of Wellness Recovery Action Planning in Denmark by Mary Ellen Copeland? Yes, okay, that's another one. Who has heard of Intentional Peer Support here by Sherry Mead? Oh, you should get her to come to Denmark. Another one is Personal Assistance in Community Existence by a man called Dan Fisher in the US and his colleagues. One that we have developed in New Zealand is peer-led workshops called Peer Zone. There are Hearing Voices networks. Do you have Hearing Voices networks in Denmark? Yay, good. But even some methodologies, even some practices that weren't developed by peers, if they are consistent with our values, they can also be useful. And some peer support workers, they use mindfulness. Do you know mindfulness? Yeah. And elements of cognitive behaviour therapy might be useful. Some peers might find that useful. Depends how it's done, of course. But we need further growth in all these practices, and there is a whole lot of work to be done in this area. Now, what kind of relationships do we have in peer-run services? And of course, one of the key things about peer services is that we have mutuality. And in some relationships are very mutual that we have, and other relationships are not very mutual at all. Now, with a traditional professional, it is very non-mutual, the relationship. But with a friend, it is very mutual. Now, if I'm a member of a support group, well, it's nearly as mutual as a friend relationship. If I'm a peer volunteer or a paid peer worker, it is still fairly mutual, but being paid does create some a little less mutuality. And of course, in the recovery literature, you see that recovery professionals, they say, well, we need to become more mutual than the traditional professionals. I saw a book by Alain Topor on the thing. Sorry, I didn't read the name, but I could understand the author. And he has talked a lot about how we need to become more mutual in a recovery, if we're a recovery professional. Now, here is a quote from an Aboriginal educator, an Australian Aboriginal educator. "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And this is really the essence of peer support. Right, now, it is very interesting. Peer support has very, very deep roots, very long roots in history. And going back to the 19th century, but even before then, one of Philippe Pinel's people working in his asylum, he once wrote to him in 1793, and he said to Philippe Pinel, "We like to employ workers who have been patients, because we find that they are more gentle and humane in this difficult work." Now, this is 1793. That is over 200 years ago. So nothing is new, as they say sometimes. But we have the alleged lunatic society in England. Alcoholics Anonymous was another wave of peer support in the drug and alcohol field. But the peer support I'm talking about today really had its origins in the survivor movement from the 1970s on. Now, the difference between the user survivor movement and Alcoholics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous say, we are not political, okay? But the user survivor movement is political. We see that power relationships are at the heart of how we experience mental health services. And we have to equalise power relationships in peer support services, but also we need to equalise them in the mental health system as a whole. Then in mental health, I said in 1793 was the first reference we have to people with lived experience working with people. But in recent times, we've had a growth in community-based services in most countries. All these things have helped to prepare the ground for peer support. Do you have policy on service user participation in Denmark? Do you know what that means? I have the right language. Of course, it doesn't make much difference, but at least it's down on paper. The recovery philosophy and policy. This has helped to prepare the ground for peer support. And of course, the failure of current mental health treatments. Now, more and more people, even people who run the mental health system, are starting to see that what we have been providing for people does not work very well. The drugs shorten people's lives. Recovery rates have not, in the West, have not increased since the 1880s. They have not increased since the drug revolution of the 1950s. There are too many people who cannot get jobs. There are too many people who are living lonely lives, who die young. And all these facts that we know now are suggesting that we need to find radically new alternatives to the way we treat people. Of course, the people who run the system will not give up what they already do, but the facts are the facts are getting stronger and stronger that what this system does to people does not work. So that is a great impetus that provides some motivation for those of us who understand these facts to create new alternatives. Next one. And there are trends in general health because the people who run the health system, well, 100 years ago, they were very worried about all these people dying from infectious diseases. Now they're worried about lifestyle-related diseases like diabetes and heart disease and cancer. And they realise that if we have conditions, whatever that condition is, we have to self-manage. We have to learn to manage our conditions. And so this is another lever we have when it comes to saying to the people who run the health system, well, peer support is about us managing our lives and getting on with our lives. That fits with where you're going in health, where you are wanting people to manage their conditions. And I'll just miss the next slide. So we go on to, it's all about timing. Oh, yes, I see timing the same in Danish. Oh, good, okay. Now, is there much peer support going on in Denmark? Good, no, you said no, I asked you that question already, yeah. So, well, it is really taking off in many countries. In America, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Scotland, England, the Netherlands, in France, okay? All these countries and more are that they are not only, they are starting to say, we need to employ peer support workers. And I think that you are going through a planning, you are planning new services in Denmark. Did the minister say there is a plan happening? Yeah? So this is your opportunity to make sure that peer support is in your plan. It is the fastest growing mental health occupation in most countries. Now, do you have financial problems in Denmark at the moment? Well, you're not in the euro, so maybe that helps, I don't know. So you can say to the politicians, well, you know, this peer support work, because we're cheaper than psychiatrists, peer support workers, and we get better outcomes. So why don't you try it out, because then you will save money. Okay. Then you can say, well, it doesn't matter whether the left wing is in or the right wing is in. They can all relate, they can all respond to peer support. The right wing, they say, oh, self-reliance. Oh, we like that. So we will support peer support work. And the left wing say, oh, giving people equal opportunities and citizen rights. Oh, that's good. So we will support peer support work. So you just speak different language to whatever government is in power. It's easy.